digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello, the world. This is Mookie. You know who I am. I'm deputy hosting for the lovely, brilliant Tanya Laird, who's going through her treatments. And we are on Digital Jam Sessions, which is a globally recognized tech podcast, talking about everything from gaming and tech and editorial and game engine and design and UI and UX and everything else in between. But most importantly, we've got the bestest cool people from all around the globe on this show. And today we're going to talk about a little bit about podcasting. I am talking to you live from Sofia, Bulgaria, and a really nice restaurant. And I'm with two new friends who work in the tech and editorial spaces. And we're going to talk a little bit about podcasting and where it sits within the world and editorially and creatively, and also within your region and what's happening in Bulgaria, which I don't think has ever been covered on this podcast. So here we are. So say hello, Alex.
Hi there.
And tell us what you do for a living and where you come from. And tell us about your favorite type of wine.
Hey there. My name is Alex. I'm a digital fossil in the era of digital natives. I've started my digital existence way back in time. I work for a media company, and what I'm doing for a living now is being a clerk. But in my free time, I'm
Tell it like it is. He's the head of digital at BTV. We can say this. But in this podcast, all views are represented are your own.
Sure. And in my free time, I'm recording a Bulgarian podcast, which is currently one of the most popular in the country. It's called Govori Internet, which literally means the internet is speaking. It is not simply a podcast. It's a podcast trend.
What happens in this podcast?
It's a podcast about everything digital, of course. I'm part of this podcast alongside the founders of the podcast, Vlado and Elenko. I'm hosting a section in the podcast called The Explainer of Boychev. Boychev is my family name. So in this section, I'm explaining stuff.
Great. Stuff is important. Violetta, hello. Welcome Digital Jam Sessions. Tell us who you are, what you do, and your hobbies, and your favorite wine. Wait a minute. Let's rewind back to Alex. What is your favorite wine? Because this is quite a wine connoisseur, ladies and gentlemen, what you don't know.
My favorite wine is a cold white one.
Do you have a specific brand or like a Bulgarian wine maybe?
I like it cold, and if they have it cold, I would prefer if they can serve it with bubbles. So
Champagne.
Actually, I would stick to Prosecco or Cava if possible. Because
Spanish or Italian? Wow.
Spanish or Italian, because I find it better in taste.
Okay, good times. You notice he didn't name any name brands. This is okay. This is a very indie podcast. The audience is primarily United Kingdom, Germany, and a little bit in the Far East and America. Here we go. Hello, Violetta. Tell us who you are, what you do, and your favorite wine.
Hi, I'm Violetta. I do social media basically, and when I'm not doing that, I'm working my pug and listening to music basically. And my favorite wine, of course, it's the cold one. Every time I would choose the cold wine. And I also really like the wine that really tastes like wine. So that's my perfect wine.
Brilliant. And okay, so guys, we're going to keep this kind of short and sweet and talk about the art of podcasting. So what in our media worlds, within digital production, social media, and the media in general, crossing over within broadcasting, radio, television, the internet of things, times have changed rapidly in the last 10 years, 5 years, 3 years. What I've personally found and professionally found is that podcasting is so important in this day and age as a piece of content. It's more than just chatting around an iPhone that looks like a tape recorder from 1983, which is what we're recording on now. But that's okay. You're never going to know this unless I tell you, which I just did. That's okay. But it's like there are appetites for there's people wanting to know about things from DIY and home repair and baby care to knitting to digital things, obviously, to social media, to celebrity things, like Alex, starting with you, what are you finding like in the general broader sense of podcasting? What are things that you think are resonating with an audience who are interested in learning more about tech maybe?
Well, basically, I think that podcasting is growing so rapidly since we are in the middle of a huge content shift appearing on all other media channels such as video and text. Cheers, ladies. They're enjoying their wine. Just off topic. So basically, with video, we see a very similar trend, or with text, we see a very similar trend. And I would say that podcasting is growing that rapidly. Since everybody is keen on listening to some good quality conversation. I won't call it journalism, since journalism is something that bears a little bit more of authority and research behind it. But people love to hear a good conversation, and podcasting is growing that much since we are in the middle of a situation where people would like to listen to non-linear conversations. And linear conversations, they are still back in the 20th century on the public radio and the private radio stations. And okay, I'm a digital fossil. I know this well. But the digital natives, they don't have any time to listen linearly to a good conversation on the radio. That's why I think podcasting is growing that much.
So would these people that don't have that time for the podcast, what's making them listen to them now?
I think people find time for podcasting. Me personally, I don't listen to podcasting like uninterruptedly. So I'm part of a 3 hours podcast. It's a long form podcast. It sounds frightening for any new user.
I am scared right now. Listen.
Indeed, it sounds frightening, but it is a podcast that actually gathers a lot of attention, a lot of audience sympathy, a lot of support, a lot of sponsorship, a lot of community. People are interested in this podcast because they can listen to it wherever and whenever they want to listen to it.
So it's almost like the podcast that you're leading is almost like a magazine of what is what. They turn to you for expert opinions.
I'm not leading it. I'm simply part of it. It's a podcast that actually posts. It gives the audience interviews to topics that wouldn't be covered in conventional media in this depth or at this point.
So conventional media being newspapers, television, things like this, right? So what you might find these topics is on social media. So Violetta, turning to you, is the things that people do talk about every day and on Instagram, on Facebook, things like this. You know what's happening. You got your finger on the pulse of this forms of publication. Like, what are the hot topics right now that people are kind of talking about on social media that could potentially influence the podcast?
Well, people are talking about everything on social media, so I don't think that we can just rule out some topics. But I think that podcasting, it really comes to play, because on social we're getting more and more used to be as short as possible and just saying something quick and easy and just move to something else. And podcasts are bringing back something deeper of how you look at a topic and how you express your opinions and how you actually form your opinions and all that in a way that is actually easier for the user to experience than, for example, reading a 10-pager on a magazine or something like that.
Yeah.
So basically, I think any topic could be a topic for social and for podcasts. But the good thing is that the podcast just goes beyond just the headline, which is maybe the way people are using social lately, and probably going more and more into that.
So it's a little bit like podcasts could be influenced by like current trends and current topics and things like this. But at the same time, like, it is an audio magazine.
Yeah.
So people are turning to podcasts. So maybe is this like primarily you're talking about like the way that people are absorbing podcasts in Bulgaria, for example? Like, do Bulgarians listen to podcasts that are from America or the UK or Digital Jam Sessions, for example? A new follower. We have 2 new followers, at least minimum. But I think the point I'm making, and I do want you to get back to what you were going to say, Alex, but it's kind of like a little bit of that balance of like, does a podcast rely on social media for keeping up with the trends, and do trends on social media refer to the podcasts for the news and things like this?
Probably it depends on how you make your podcast.
Right.
You could use topics from social to drive the topics on your podcast, and that would be great because you would know what people are talking about already. But I wouldn't limit a podcast just to things that are trendy on social.
No, of course not. But as a podcast producer, Alex, do you have social media?
Actually, we do. Yes, we are but it's not social media in the meaning that we have like a Facebook page or an Instagram account or stuff. We do have a Twitter account in this podcast that I'm part of. Yes, we also
You are so busted, dude.
we also do have a Facebook page. But what really triggers the attention towards our podcast is that we have a community with a server-based chat. What I mean is that it's like in old times IRC channels. So our podcast is supported by patrons on the Patreon web donation platform, and all patrons have the right to participate in a secret, so a closed group chat.
Which is amazing because you built a community based off donations of people who are giving their personal money. That was a toast to this announcement. That people are making their own choice to part with their own money to support you to produce this show. But in return, they get their contributions contributing toward your editorial.
So with their contribution, they're supporting the existence of this podcast. So
Right.
they're supporting production quality, production facilities. This community is the essential. It is the essential driver of the popularity of this podcast because it is
You're including them from
thing.
the beginning.
Precisely.
Aren't you? Right,
And what I wanted to say, why podcasts are so popular, I was thinking about this since I have like nearly 20 years of experience in conventional media, being newspapers, magazines, radio, now television and internet. I would say that we are living in an era where Mr. Trump has completely right that this is the post-truth era. So post-truth means that actually the public speaking is so tweaked and so dependent on communicational specialists, twisting the conversation, like saying that, the black is white, etc. So people need the podcasts as a source of freedom of expression. I would say
you would call a podcast almost like a comforting, warm blanket amongst this fake news and things.
Yeah.
Because, we can go fake news is a different podcast. We can go there. But.
Yeah, and also not only just because fake news, but also overproduced news. Podcasts,
we're all nodding our head as journalists, editorial people, right?
Yeah, so for me, I would say like podcasts are like the Instagram of speech, basically. It's just liberates the media, which is really cool.
Some of them.
Yeah, some of them.
Not all of them. But what I think what podcasts I find in because I listen to a lot of them and we make them here. We're listening to one right now. They have this like kind of like arc of integrity. Mm-hmm. Like that's different from a radio thing, which is regurgitating news. It's regurgitating this and this and this, and a lot of radio that we listen to. You do have like qualified journalists that are giving truthful, factual stories about things. And then it could be like an arc of somebody tweeting something or Instagramming something that says that's wrong. And then suddenly this bandwagon of people believe it. In this day and age of fake news and quick-minded statements that could or could not influence somebody's opinion, how do you keep your integrity? Or how does one keep their integrity? I want to know about your integrity first, Alex.
Sure. I have to say it's really a good question because it's while we're producing the podcast we're part of, we're always bear in mind that we have to keep the principles of truth. Mm-hmm. So it's a liberation in form.
It's like a factual, opinionated type of audio magazine podcast that you produce.
Yes.
It's about tech and it's about
tech and lifestyle and tech lifestyle and general lifestyle topics.
New gadgets,
we have gadgets. We have also politics, though. We have also social development. So
Alex, you mentioned the kind of social topics that could be in your podcast, or maybe they aren't. Where are these opinions based from? Or
so it's topics that are covered by the guests. So it's our podcast is always an invited guest that is hosted by Elenko and Vlado, who are the hosts of Internet Speaking. And it's really a liberation in form. So we are keeping the standards of fact checking and researching the topics, which only means that we are relevant and we are not trying to cheat on our listeners. but it is still a very romantic form of expression, I would say. It's still in its romantic phase.
But I like that. I like that you said that that's romantic, because to me that's keeping your journalistic integrity, which I think people don't say those two words very often. When even if, as people who are writing and producing video and audio content and visual content and still content and we are producing content that relates to our audiences, whether you're working on a television show, no matter what region you live in or where you come from, the ultimate goal is to relate to your audience and the fans and have a vibe and have people respond and feel that response and then do something positive with it. And ultimately, if you're fact checking and you're doing these kind of things, you are doing your damnedest to make sure that you have a validity of truth to what you're saying. And, oftentimes what could skew that is people on social, being sitting there trolling, and they just sit on Facebook and want to hate. How do you control that kind of thing, Violetta? Because you can't. I know you can't. We know that you can't. But in a way, how do you know that, when you're actually monitoring some of your social channels for what you do for major brands and major broadcasters in this beautiful Eastern European region that we're in at the moment, how do you try to justify what is protecting real news over fake news over trolls?
Well, first, I always start by trying to create this community of positive, actual people who actually
build your allies.
Yeah,
build your allies.
Yeah. And
hashtag build your allies.
Yeah. So then I wouldn't have to just explain everything to each troll or whatever, and I would be able to actually ignore most of them. And then if I get to a point close to a crisis, I know that I have allies who would jump up and defend me, and not me just explaining myself away.
So Alex, what is the social media hand of choice that our listeners on Digital Jam Sessions can find you on?
So it's Boych, which is BOYTCH. It's very similar to will.i.am, I guess. So
it's exactly like it. It's so 2008.
But Boych is going to be great again.
There we go. We are the hip hop scene is very rife in Bulgaria, and I'm really happy to introduce the new hip hop artist, Boych, MC Boych.
MC Boych in the house.
Great. Violetta, where can we find you on social media?
You can find me on Instagram, and I'm at Vertoletta, written with 3 L's, so it's VERTELLETA. That's my handle.
And Instagram is your social handle of choice.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because we talked about Twitter not being very relevant in Bulgaria, but maybe that's a separate podcast too. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Violetta. You guys are completely awesome. And we'll do many more of these, I'm sure. As always, you can find me at Mookie Approved on Twitter and Instagram. And of course, the Digital Jam Session podcast at Digital Jam Ltd. Thank you, and keep listening. And if you liked what you heard, please put in your comments, share with your friends, neighbors, frenemies, dogs, pugs, and everyone else in between. Thank you, and good night. Live from Bulgaria.
Ciao.
Bye. Ciao.
Thinking of starting your own podcast? Why not speak to the GL Pro UK team? They handle all of our podcasting service needs. Tell them that Digital Jam Session sent you and you'll get 10% off your first order. Find out more at www.glpro.co.uk.
digitaljamsessions.com